Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. A little bit of housekeeping before I introduce our guest. If you do not have a handout, we made 40 copies because we have no idea how many we would need. If you do not have one and want a copy, and we're out here, you let us know, and Riley will make some more copies for us. There will be in the second floor nook, either what's tomorrow, Friday or Saturday, there will be a large print copy for you of the handout if you're having trouble reading this, because some of it is small print. So you can refer to it. And also, our guest provided me with the bills for redistricting for the state of New Hampshire. The House of Representatives bill has passed, but 2 for the Senate have not. Is that correct?
The Senate and Executive Council.
Okay, Senate and Executive Council have not passed, but she has provided us with a copy of the bills. I will put those there along with the large print handout for any information you would like to read. And it will stay there for a good 2 weeks in the nook so that you have access to it for what information you would care to check. The purpose of today's forum originally was conceived by Yvonne Gillen. And the idea was we have so many new residents here within the last year that are not from the state of New Hampshire. We wanted to make information available because there's so much that's unique about the state government in New Hampshire, and we wanted to provide that information, particularly for our new residents, but for residents who've been here for a while. Some of this information might be new for you too. So it's a gift to all of you, thanks to Yvonne. And I am very happy to introduce you to Amber Byron. Amber has her Bachelor of Arts degree from St. Anselm College, her Master of Art from the University of New Hampshire. She works for the college boards as a test grader, so I think that indeed is a very interesting side gig for her. And she's a cantor and a church choir director. So she comes with many interests, and we're delighted that she's here. She walked out the door of her school a little after 1 o'clock today at Trinity High School and came straight here. And I promised her that this would be the best classroom group of students all day long. So, so please help me warmly welcome Amber Byron.
Thank you, everyone. As Diana mentioned, I teach at Trinity High School. I have been teaching there for 15 years. For the past 5 years, I have been teaching both AP Comparative Government, which is looking at governments, comparing them, like what do different governments have in common from across different countries. I've also been teaching AP US Government and Politics. I also advise the Youth and Government Club, which is a model state legislature, or well, not just state legislature, but an entire state government. And you have everything from government to state legislators to a Supreme Court to lobbyists to a newspaper, the whole thing. And we get together with students from across the state at the State House in Concord to run that. And that actually just happened this past weekend. And one of our lawyers won the Supreme Court award. So we were very impressed that she did that. So I am here today to talk about how New Hampshire government works, how some of the Manchester government works, just, you know, some basic stuff about voting, redistricting, because New Hampshire is a very politically active state, probably one of the most politically active states in the country. This past voting season, during this past primary season, I went around to go and hear as many people speak who are running in the primary as I possibly could. I talked to as many different people who were, also there hearing people speak as they could. And it was really great. I spoke to a couple who were from coastal Maine, and Maine had never really been political, but they moved up their primary, and now they were kind of getting more involved in it. And the couple had originally been from Maine, had moved to Chicago, had moved back to coastal Maine to be closer to their grandkids. And they were so impressed that now more candidates were spending time in Maine, but they were so close to the New Hampshire border that they were able to go and listen to candidates speak. They were, crossing the border into New Hampshire, right, to come hear candidates speak. But they said they didn't get that one-on-one when they were in Chicago. No one paid attention to politics when they were in Chicago, and they were really felt that they were going to take advantage of the time they had being right on the coast of Maine to come cross the border into New Hampshire to hear different candidates speak, but also now that candidates were spending some time in Maine to hear candidates speak, they really wanted to take advantage of that and hear who they could. And I thought that was really interesting. I've been in New Hampshire. I've lived in New Hampshire now for just over 20 years. I myself grew up in northern Maine, so it was interesting to hear their perspective. Growing up in northern Maine, I knew what they meant. Politicians never paid attention to us, so I got what they were saying. So we'll kind of get started. I do have some links on the slideshow, so I will from time to time show you what those links are, where you can find some of this information. I did send this presentation to Riley as a Google slide document that can be shared really with anyone. And I'm more than happy to share it with all of you as well. I can send it out as a PDF to people, and you can have those links as well. Or I can just show you where you can just kind of do a Google search to find these websites and get that information. So we'll start with voting. And of course, there are 3 different levels of voting, both at the federal or national level, the state level, and the local level. And in New Hampshire, we love voting, and it seems like we vote all the time. So every 2 years, of course, there is a primary in September and then a general election in November. That rule is a little bit different for the presidential primary, which happens earlier, usually in February. Members of the U.S. House of Representatives are voted on every 2 years. That's in every state. That goes for the entire country. If you are a member of the House of Representatives, your term is only 2 years. That's for everyone. New Hampshire has 2 representatives. That is dependent. Every state, it's different. It's dependent on population of that state, right? Places like California, New York, Texas that are going to have a large population have more. Some states that have a smaller population than New Hampshire only have 1. So currently New Hampshire has 2. Chris Pappas represents District 1, which we are a part of, and Annie McLean-Custer represents District 2. So if you cross the border and go towards Nashua, that is District 2. And we'll talk about redistricting a little bit later, but that is the big one that has been vetoed by Governor Sununu as they try to change the border of where that is, because that really could change the political landscape of not just New Hampshire, but also the makeup of the country. And those are the ones that national politicians pay attention to, because it could mean who is in Washington and what is that makeup like of Republicans and Democrats and who's representing who. The president, of course, is voted on every 4 years. Members of the Senate are voted on every 6 years. And those 6 years alternate, so there's a new crop coming in every 2 years. And it's sort of so you have some older members and some new members coming in all the time. So you have like a third basically changes over every 2 years. And the senators represent the entire state. Every state has 2 senators. Currently in New Hampshire, it is Maggie Hassan and Jean Shaheen. So for our state voting, and this is different depending on the state. New Hampshire, the governor's term is 2 years. Some states, their governor's term is 4 years. But here in New Hampshire, it's 2 years. As I said, we love voting. So the more often we can do it, we'll take it, right? House of Representatives, every 2 years, we have 400 members in our House of Representatives. It is some members represent 45 districts. Some members are single member districts, meaning that it's just one member for that district. Some members are what are called multi-member districts, meaning there are more than one member representing that district. So like when you go to vote, right, sometimes you'll see on the ballot, vote for no more than 2, vote for no more than 3. That means it is a multi-member district. And it basically means that district has enough people that it needs more people representing that district. State Senate, again, every 2 years, there are 24 districts. Each district has 1 senator. The New Hampshire legislature is the second largest in the United States after the US legislature. I joke with my students that if you walk down the street, about every 3rd or 4th person you meet is probably has been voted into office in some way, shape, or form. Either a senator, a state legislator, an alderman, a school board member, a county clerk, a moderator, something in New Hampshire because we love voting. County commissioner, and that I looked, I did some research on that, looked that up to see if there is any like consistency across the board. It really varies on the county, how long they're in office, how they get voted in, how what the rules are for how that works. And then executive council, that is divided into 5 districts. Again, every 2 years, we're very concerned in New Hampshire that someone might hold power for too long. We don't have term limits, but we want to make sure we vote for you every 2 years in case you, to do something we don't like, and we can vote you back out of office. And so all of this information can be found on the Secretary of State's office. And if you just write sos.nh.gov, that brings you to their general website. I do have it up here. They give you a whole rundown of what you need to do to run for office. This has all the various voting districts, and we can look them all up if you really wanted to. If we go and kind of see all of the various printable things. I guess I don't know how I got even to this one. But if I go back to running for office, you have all of the various things you need to fill out, campaign finance, all kinds of fun stuff. But this has all of the information you need, how to get absentee voter information, where you go to vote, how you can track your ballot. So who are your various representatives? So your executive council member is Ted Gassis. He is actually a former mayor of New Hampshire. He's had many other political offices in and around Manchester. Your Hillsborough County Commissioner is Tony Pappas. She's held that position, I believe, as long as I've lived in New Hampshire. So she's had that for many years now. And your senator is Kevin Kavanaugh. And you'll see, so his district, his Senate district, encompasses a number of wards. You are in Ward 12. So Ward 1 and Ward 2. Ward 1 is, and Ward 2 are other wards in the north end of Manchester. So It's covering a pretty large area. There are actually 3 county commissioners for Hillsborough County. Some of the smaller counties don't have quite that many, but Hillsborough County is a pretty populous county. So this is where you get some pretty small print on that sheet. These are your various representatives. You might recognize someone on that sheet. Right, it's not every day that you have one of your neighbors as, maybe it is, I mean, it is New Hampshire. So it actually, I had one of my neighbors who was our school board rep for a while. So, I mean, I think my boss was, when I first moved to Manchester, my boss was on the school board too. So it's, you know, that's a very common New Hampshire thing. So you have 6 representatives that represent you, but they actually cover different districts. Your ward shows up in a couple of different districts, which is kind of a very strange and unique thing to have happen. And it's just sort of, as population changed, as populations have grown, they've added in some more, like how they're going to change things, how they're going to appoint districts. And so, you know, you've got District 12, District 45, District 19, all being that Ward 12 is part of. So District 12 is just your ward, but District 19 and District 45, and please kind of correct me if I'm wrong, encompass other wards as well. Is right? Yes. So that's how that all works out. So if you need things, right, these are the people that you would reach out to. I mean, I guess you know who you should go to first. He lives right here. But if you don't like what he has to say, you've got some other people that. Right. I mean, as a school teacher, I understand that. You know, when kids don't like what I have to say, they will often go to other people and see if they have. And actually, now I work as a guidance counselor too. And if kids don't like what I have to say as their guidance counselor, they'll try to circumvent and go to someone else and see if they say something different. Usually they say the exact same thing. So what is it that the Executive Council does? And this is, again, another unique New Hampshire thing. Not every state has an Executive Council. They are advisors to the governor and really are an extension of the executive branch. They are tasked with executing the law, right? Making sure those laws are followed. And really, one of the big things that they do is overseeing that budget, is making sure money is being spent the way they feel it should be being spent. They have a huge say in approving that budget, overseeing that, appropriating money, and making sure it goes to where it needs to go. They also approve appointments of judges, commissioners, various other government positions. They also can appoint citizens to serve on various committees, and they oversee the 10-year highway plan that goes out that comes up every 10 years. So if you want to serve on the Executive Council, what do you need to do? What are your qualifications? Because as I said, this is unique to, somewhat unique to New Hampshire. Not every state has this. You need to be 30 years old, be a registered voter, and have lived in New Hampshire for 7 years, and live in the district that you want to represent. So you can't live in a different district and say, well, I'm going to go, you know, you can't live in District 5 and try to represent District 4. You have to have been in that district. And as I said earlier, there are no term limits. You can hold that seat for many, many years, but you have to make sure you are voted on. You get re-voted on every 2 years to that seat. And they really do work hand in hand with the governor, reviewing different laws that the House or Senate has passed, making sure that is right for New Hampshire. They really serve as kind of an advisory council if you will. And then, and I think this really speaks again to this very New Hampshire notion of we don't want any one person to become too powerful. So, we've got this almost check on the governor's power with this executive council. All right, so local voting. New Hampshire has both cities and towns. That is two distinct types of government. Manchester is a city, which it's not just, meaning you are at a certain population, right? It is an actual distinct type of government that exists, meaning we have a mayor and a board of aldermen that oversee our government. So every 2 years, we have a nonpartisan primary in September, which basically means the two top vote getters, no matter what their party is not listed on the ballot. Whoever those two top vote getters are, they end up facing off in a general election later in November. And it's odd years. So state and federal election happen in even years. The local election, the city election happens in odd years because we want to, here in New Hampshire, we want to show up at the polls every November, no matter what. We've got it marked on our calendar. We're going to be there. So we have a mayor, we have an alderman, one per ward. You are in Ward 12, and 2 at large, meaning they represent the entire city. That's what at large means. Those, we'll get to what the aldermen are in a minute, but they basically are like again, an advisory board that work with the mayor. There's also a school board, same thing, 1 per ward, 2 at large. There are also, for every ward, a moderator, a ward clerk, and 3 selectmen that oversee the elections for that ward. So when you go to vote, like the people that are those are the people making sure that election runs smoothly. So again, this goes to every 3rd person you meet has been voted into office. Because if you think 12 wards, there are 3 per ward, 3 selectmen plus these other 2. So what we could do the math on this, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times if we, include school board and alderman. So times 12, that's, so that's quite a few people now, just in Manchester, who are elected to office, not including your senator, your House of Representatives, your executive council. So this is a map of the wards. And you can see the closer the wards in the center of the city are smaller, where people tend to be more concentrated. And then they get a little bit bigger on the outside, where houses are a bit more spread out, where you have a bit more land. And this is online, that link that was on my website, that was on the slide presentation was just a link to this map. This is on the city's website where you can go and find this. Some of these lines, things that are dividing it. So this trying to think where it is, between 8 and 9, that's 293 right there. That's dividing it. The river divides 10 and 11 from Ward 3. So they do try to find some natural boundaries to divide those wards up. Over here between 6 and 8, some of this is 93. If you're on one side of 93 or the other, that depends on which ward you're in. I find it funny. So I think it's ward, trying to remember what wards they are. I think it's 1 and 3. 1 and 3. I teach at Trinity High School, which is kind of right across the street from Hillside Middle School. And then just kind of next door to us and back a little ways is, I don't remember the name of the elementary school right off the top of my head. McDonough, thank you, McDonough Elementary School. They are both voting places for two different wards. You could throw a rock and hit the other one. And, you know, so it's like really funny, you know, that these are two different voting places for two different wards. Maybe it's 2 and 3, it might be 2 and 3 that they're the voting districts, but I'm not exactly sure, but I always find it so funny that on voting day, like Trinity's not a voting place, but the school on one side of us is, the school on the other side is for an entirely different ward. But it's just, I believe Bridge Street is the dividing line between these two wards. And Hillside's on one side of Bridge Street, McDonough's on the other side. All right, so what does the alderman do? As I said, so this is actually, that first quote is from the city charter describing exactly what they do. They really, again, are in charge of the budget, act as, they work with the mayor to approve of anything. They do have public meetings every month. Usually it's either the first or second Tuesday of the month, depending on which month it is. There's like certain months that it's on the second Tuesday, there are certain months it's on the first Tuesday. And you can go and sit in the audience. You can watch them online. If you would like to go and speak, if you have something you would like addressed, you can do that. You just have to submit your remarks ahead of time to the city clerk to make sure you get on the agenda. You basically, I think, have to do that by the Friday before the next meeting. It's not that they do that not because they want to stifle your freedom of expression or anything like that. I always have to tell my high school kids that, because high school kids are always they don't want to hear me talk. No, it's so they can make sure it gets on the agenda, so they know, what to plan for, what to expect. They do limit public comments to a certain amount of time as well. So they want to make sure, they can kind of say, well, we're all booked this one. Can you come maybe to next week when we have, or the next month when we have more time? BMA is short for Board Mayor and Aldermen, right? Because they are working collaboratively together. And as we said, that public session usually lasts about 30 minutes. So these are your aldermen and your school board members. I don't know how long they have held those offices, but this is taken right from the city's website. You can find this information pretty easily with the Google search. This said, what committees they're on, where they live, how you get in contact with them, the whole deal. All right, so let's talk a little bit about redistricting, because I know that was a request that you wanted to learn more about. And really the simple answer is redistricting is still being discussed. Nothing has really been set out in concrete yet. But basically, in the Constitution, it says every 10 years a census must be taken for the purpose of redistricting. That was, set out over 200 years ago that this must happen. So in New Hampshire, not only are those congressional districts talked about that I mentioned earlier, but also everything from the state Senate to the state House of Representatives, Executive Council. They even look at some of the wards, not necessarily the Manchester wards, but in that House bill for the New Hampshire House of Representatives, they actually discussed the Portsmouth wards. That was part of the bill in that. So, and as I said, each one of those is a separate bill. The House bill has been finalized. The Senate bill for redistricting the Senate and the Executive Council have not. So you can go and look up a bill at the General Court website, which I have right here. And there was actually a hearing today on Senate Bill 240, which is the Senate redistricting, and Senate Bill 241, which is the Executive Council one. It was at like 10:30 this morning. So still like very new information. The woman from the House Sergeant of Arms office was like, you should come up. And I'm like, I can't, I like teach in school. That's not gonna happen, but thank you. So this is a really great website. You can, if you know the bill you want, you can just do a search for it. So Senate Bill 240. Oops, get rid of that. So if I go here and do a search for it, it tells me that it's still being discussed. And yep, 10 a.m. this morning was the last hearing about it. So still very much being talked about. If I go back, let's see if it will let me. See if I can find, I don't know, they might not have the YouTube link up. They do have YouTube links up for some of these bills. So, yeah. Here's the, if we go to the Senate home, right, from that general court, right, you just go to where it says Senate and scroll down. There are a whole special committee on redistricting, videos of committee meetings. They might not have the most recent one up from today. It looks like, but you can go and watch all of these. Yeah, it says last updated October 15th. But they do have, let's see, they just have, they might have the, so these, they might not have, they do have stuff from this morning up here. So they have the Senate Judiciary, which was live, which is live right now. I don't see anything on redistricting yet. But if you go to the multimedia channel, they do have all kinds of stuff from the Senate as well. Oops, they're a bit too far. But they do have anything that you want to watch. You can watch various committees, all of their stuff that they've got. So they just might not have fully uploaded it. Yes, go back. All right, so let's go back to this. All right, so as I said, the Senate House Bill 50, which is redistricting the House of Representatives, has been passed. Not much has really changed in that, but 240, Senate Bill 240 and 241 still are up in the air. And we do have copies of those bills for you if you do want to take a look. All right, so congressional redistricting. That passed, but the governor decided to veto it. And there is all kinds of debate about that. Basically, after the census was determined and they looked at the numbers, it basically showed that District 1 had approximately 18,000 more people than District 2. So, okay, we need to kind of move something out of District 1 and into District 2 to even out those numbers. And of course, there's like lots of different ways to do this. Democrats suggested moving Hampstead to District 2. Republicans came up with a plan of moving all kinds of towns, this, that, and everywhere else. And it was the GOP plan that was adopted, but that was vetoed by Governor Sununu, which is really interesting, right? Because he's also a Republican. So he vetoed the plan passed by his own party, basically saying it didn't pass the smell test, was how he phrased it. And the word that always goes with redistricting is gerrymandering. You may have heard that. Now, we pronounce it gerrymandering. It actually comes from a Massachusetts politician with the last name Gary. So it actually should be pronounced gerrymandering, but that doesn't sound as good. So we call it gerrymandering. And there are districts that have like really funny shapes and everything else. And the idea is to keep political power in the hands of one political party. And there are companies out there that make jewelry based on gerrymandered districts. There's a company that has come up with fonts that you can like type using gerrymandered districts. As a politics teacher, you know, we find all of these fun things. There was a woman I believe in Michigan, who decided to go for a run one day and run through 3 different political districts in her neighborhood. It took her past 4 houses. That sounds like my kind of run. So, you know, so right, so clearly something is probably not right with that district if she goes by 4 houses and she's now in 3 different congressional districts. So in Sununu's plan, he has offered his own plan for what this might look like. He hasn't, I'll show you a map of some of these districts on the next slide. He hasn't issued a map of what it would look like, but basically it would keep seacoast towns in District 1, but it would basically move Salem to District 2. There must be some other things because I'm pretty sure Salem is probably larger than 1,800 people, so it must be moving something else into District 1. But this has not really been, I think this is still in talks. Am I right, Ken? You guys haven't voted on this yet. So this is where it currently is. This is the current from 2012. This is the last time anything, you know, this is the last one. This is the plan that was passed in the New Hampshire legislature, and you can kind of see, right, it kind of does this little shoot up the middle, really on either side of 93, with District 2 coming down on either side. I had someone tell me it looks like a weird finger in the middle of the state. I won't tell you which finger they said, but you know, so that's basically, you know, what was going on. They do need to get this done because, you know, time's ticking on this, and they need to file this with the federal government. So, because we need to know who can run for that office. They need to be able to file for office. And from time to time, right, like New Hampshire's not the only state doing this. Every state has to look at their congressional districts and they need to file them with the federal government. And, and the federal government does review them and make sure they're okay. And my students always ask, well, how come there isn't just, like set rules for this? How come it's not just, the federal government kind of comes in and says, it has to be done this way, it has to be done this way, and everything else. And really the federal government kind of year after year for 200 years has said, this is for the states to decide. This is, I keep using the word, we have a federal government. Federal means power is shared at a national level and at a state level. And so that's what, this is one of these places where they want to make sure that there is some power still within the states. And they don't want to tell the states, this is how you have to run it. So they want to make sure that states still have some of their own autonomy, some of their own authority to do things the way they want to do. So they kind of keep saying, no, this is up to the states to decide how they want to run it. The Supreme Court kind of keeps turning away cases about gerrymandering, saying, we're not going to get involved in politics. We don't want to get involved in political matters. It is up to states to figure this out, and we're not going to get involved. So, the end result, I'm not a mind reader. Working in a high school, trust me, I do not want to be. I would never get a moment's sleep. So I don't know where this will end up. They certainly don't have enough votes to override the governor's veto. So that's not going, there needs to be some sort of compromise. Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is there not an election coming up in November?
There is, but they need to file this before that.
I know that. Yeah. Connecticut's way, I thought they were behind.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, they're going to have to do something, and that's why I think it's very interesting, right? That Sununu has vetoed this, going against his own party. What does that mean for his political ambitions? I don't know. I think it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. I'm an avid political watcher of stuff like that. I really like watching things like that to see how that goes, and I don't know the answer. I wish I did. I think there's going to have to be a compromise. What that looks like, I don't know. And I mean, Ken might have more information on, where the pulse of the House is on this matter. I mean, and kind of what their thoughts are. Are the Republicans willing to, are the Democrats willing to go with Sununu's plan? I don't know the answer to that. So I don't know even if you guys have had time to even discuss it.
A lot of discussion, very little decision. And it has important implications. These congressional districts also have big implications out of Washington. Look what happens in the Senate. It's 50 senators, 100 senators, and then right now divided 50-50. And so neither party is completely powerful. One person who changes from one party to the other can shift the whole balance of power in Washington, D.C. One more Democrat elected is one more Democrat elected, then they're in the power. And same thing in the state. Right now we're the minority party, Republican majority party. You don't realize what an important implication that has for everything. And it only takes a couple of seats to change the whole balance of power.
Thank you.
I would have the main thing why this has to be decided quickly is that we have two representatives now, and they don't know what their district's gonna be, right?
Right, I mean, I think, so Chris Pappas is in Manchester, they're not talking about moving Manchester at all. Annie McLean Custer, I believe, is from Nashua. They're not moving Nashua at all, but what other towns and cities might be in their district is certainly really important. And who might want to run against them? And some of those other people that like, okay, if I'm from Hampstead and I want to run for office, well, which district? If I'm from Salem and I want to run for office, well, which district am I running in? And I think that's exactly why they really need to make this decision sooner rather than later. I believe filing date is in July. So, oh, June. So we're in mid-April. So, you know, truly the clock is ticking on this, and they need to get something resolved. And whatever they come up with, I mean, that's it for 10 years. That's what it has to be for 10 years until this census happens again. And, you know, now you figure out, okay, where are people living now? And then they do, I mean, this process happens every 10 years. And it's looked at, and where are people living? And, you know, what towns do we move now? And again, and this is why, too, it's important who is in charge of the state House of Representatives, who is in charge of the state Senate when it's time to redistrict, because they're the ones making that decision. Not just in New Hampshire, in every state. They're the ones making that decision. So, I mean, that is why when you turn on the news, there is so much, if you talk about congressional districts, because those congressional districts also determine the electoral districts when it comes time to vote for president, of where those electoral votes come from. And so it does play an implication into presidential elections as well. So, I mean, it does have a larger implication in why it really is. So, I mean, sometimes like when I tell my students, you know, they kind of get this, well, I don't know, does my vote really count? And I'm like, yes, it does really count, because you may not feel it counts in big elections like president or even state senator, but it absolutely counts in your local elections, because some of those you see, and it's a matter of 30 votes, of 50 votes, and that may determine who's in charge of the state Senate, of who's in charge of the House of Representatives, and they're going to be the ones much more deciding your fate than Washington. They're the ones that have much more to do with your everyday existence than Washington does. So yes, your vote counts. And I would say the same thing to all of you as well, although you are more up to vote than someone under the age of 20, between the ages of 18 and 25. And, you know, I teach about voting trends too, to all of them. Did you have a question? Yeah.
Yes. What kind of turnout do you get in local elections, percentage wise?
Oh, I don't know the percentage numbers off the top of my head, but I do know, generally speaking, New Hampshire has pretty high voter turnout. New Hampshire has, you know, has high political efficacy, which political efficacy means like you have a feeling that your government works for you, and that not only that your government works for you, but that you matter to the government. So it's kind of like a two-way street. Not only do you matter to the government, but the government matters to you. So New Hampshire tends to have pretty high voter turnout in comparison to the rest of the country. And I mean, I think we see this. I was actually just talking, my students right now are learning about voting behavior and stuff like that. In every election, there's always some town. There's always some town where you see like really long lines at the election, at the polls. And it's always a different town. It's always a different one every year, and it's never repeated. And it's, you know, somehow some town like does something weird at their election. They, you know, change the traffic pattern or whatever, and it messes everyone up. But Manchester, you know, for as long as at least I've been paying attention, Manchester does a really good job of organizing their elections. And yes, sometimes you may have to wait in line, but you never see huge lines in Manchester. They generally do a really good job of turning people over. They usually have enough poll workers, volunteers, voting booths set up to really like understand that people are coming in and there's going to be a lot of people there to vote, and they can kind of turn people over really quickly in that process, which is why it's also really important to register to vote too. That way they know, that helps them prepare for how many people might show up to vote. So they know like how many people are registered voters in this district. So we kind of have an idea how many people might show up to vote today. So we're not, certainly one of the, you know, and I think this is a really great thing about New Hampshire is that you can register to vote at the polls. I think that opens up voting to people who may, you know, if you've got a 9-to-5 job, it's sometimes really hard to get down to City Hall to register to vote, to try to take time off, to go and register to vote, you know, and make that happen. But if you can now register at the polls and just kind of say, I'm going to do it in one shot before I go to work, that makes it easier now for for people to go and actually vote. Yes.
Can you do it online?
Well, you can print out the forms, but you need to show ID. And well, you need to have proof of residence and some sort of, you know, sign some affidavits and stuff like that. So you can't register to vote online, but you can print out some of the forms and stuff ahead of time. But you can't register to vote online.
It's not, we believe you, what we do in Connecticut, got it.
Yeah, you can request, if you are already registered, you can request an absentee ballot online. I mean, there are certain things that you can do online, but there are some things that you can't do. So that's the other thing. If you are a registered voter, it actually is pretty easy to get that absentee ballot. Just make sure you don't get your absentee ballot, mail it in, and then go to the polls. Right? You can't vote twice. Just pick one or the other.
We should add that the city clerk's office in Manchester does come to RiverWoods to allow people to register. They also allow you to request your absentee ballots here.
I don't know.
Residency.
Since COVID, they no longer send people out.
Oh, that's right.
So since COVID, they no longer we do that in house. If you want to register to vote, I have all your forms.
That's great.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a really great that you can do that. So you can register right here, which is they have the forms to do that. It's a pretty simple. I've gone with students in the summer they turn 18 at the end of the school year or at this start of the summer, and I've gone with some of my former students to City Hall while they register to vote, and then we go and get Ben and Jerry's after because it's like right next door, and it's really great. And I had a student a couple years ago who actually was adopted out of Romania, and he had to show up with a whole file to prove that he was a U.S. citizen. Like his adoption paperwork, his naturalization papers, what judge signed his adoption papers, what court was he adopted out of. I mean, his process took like 30 minutes to make sure he was registered to vote. The other girl was like, yep, here's my address, here's my license, sign me up. And so, I mean, it was really interesting to see that. Other questions?
Can you address this?
Okay, perfect.
This is a little bit off the subject, but I'm hearing on TV a mess about the primary and how New Hampshire might lose the first in the nation, but I don't understand what's going on.
So there are always other states vying to have the first primary. And a lot of that, you know, they look at New Hampshire and they kind of say, New Hampshire is not really diverse. We don't represent a good picture of what the country looks like. We're really small. And so there have been, and even some politicians kind of say, yeah, maybe we should move it somewhere else. We actually have a law that says our primary needs to go first. Now, no other state necessarily needs to follow that. It's not a federal law, it's only a New Hampshire law. But basically what that means is that our primary can keep moving up. We don't set our date until usually very late, so we can pay attention to what other states are doing, so that we can have that first primary. So here's a fun story as to why New Hampshire has the first primary. It's because we're cheap. And so towns, not cities, towns have town meeting hall day. And town meeting hall day used to be the primaries, you know, back however many years ago, primaries were held usually in like September. And then the general election the general election was usually later, or general election was in November and the primary was like beginning of September. Well, New Hampshire had their town meeting hall day usually sometime in the spring. And New Hampshire's like, well, we don't want to turn the heat on twice. We don't want to open town hall twice. We're going to just have the primary on town meeting hall day. And if you haven't registered yourself as a candidate by then, well, tough cookies. Because that's when our primary is going to be, because we are cheap Yankee New Hampshireites and thrifty. Yes, we are thrifty. And so that was how we ended up with this primary before anyone else. And then it really wasn't until like the 60s and 70s that politicians started to kind of capitalize that up a little bit and start campaigning on New Hampshire, kind of like, hey, I won the New Hampshire primary. I won the first primary. And now it is kind of steamrolled into this whole thing, and it brings a lot of money to our state. And so it is very important to the state to keep that. So it actually, I mean, it kind of wasn't talked about as much in the last election, but I know about maybe 12, 16 years ago, it was talked about a lot that they wanted, you know, there's a whole bunch of other states that were trying to take over that spot. And, you know, they kind of compromised with, you know, Super Tuesday and a bunch of other states, you know, kind of pushed up their primary, and that kind of kept them at bay for a little while. But certainly they're nosing around a little bit. But we do have it in law that New Hampshire has to be first. I mean, that may be that we're voting on Christmas. You know, I don't know what that will look like. Yeah. And then they were able to kind of push it back a little bit because other states were like, all right, fine, we'll leave it alone. But they're kind of circling it again. So, you know, certainly something to pay attention for, but I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, so long as New Hampshire has anything to say about it. They can have as many caucuses as they want, because that's not a primary.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So actually, our time in this room is up, but I can stay later and chat with people if you would like.
Please help me thank you. That's what I'm doing.
I don't